in that case, three persons in one being. And it would be similar with the Siamese twins or triplets. You have three brains, three centers of self-consciousness, and so three persons. Now, in the case of God, he doesn't have a physical body. So what I argue there is that God is an immaterial spiritual substance or soul who is so richly endowed with cognitive faculties that he has three sets of cognitive faculties, each sufficient for personhood. And therefore, there are in God three centers of self-consciousness. And that would be a model of what it is to talk of God as an immaterial tripersonal being.
Mohamed, you've got 10 seconds.
Yeah. You say that this is not an analogy, but that's exactly what you write in your article. You say perhaps we can get a start at this question by means of an analogy. That's what
Mr. Hijab, that's a springboard to thinking about
Dr.
it.
Craig, let's let Mohamed finish his thought here.
I understand, but you denied in your response there that this was an analogy, and you've written in your written work that this is perhaps we can get a start at this question by means of an analogy. And then you mentioned Cerberus as the analogy. So the point is this. I know it's difficult. I know it's very embarrassing. I'm sorry to say. I mean, comparing God to a dog anyway. I mean, we wouldn't compare a prophet to a god, but let's just, for the sake of argument, we're analogizing God with the dog. Now, I asked you a question, which is that if you have a conjoined twin, Siamese twins, one of them commits murder, we're going to put both of them in prison. One of them does something. This dog here can lick this dog. This here can bite this dog. These are three different centers of consciousness. Why are we considering this to be one dog only because it has overlapping bodies? This is a question that was posed to you in the academic literature. We've heard your response. I have to say it's a very insufficient and unsatisfactory response. Absolutely unsatisfactory. This is your model of the Trinity. I think this could be debunked by children, with all due respect. This is your model of the Trinity. Now, going to the part of you have to now maintain that God is made out of parts. And you've said this. Clearly, you have the view that God is that there are parts of God. No problem. My question to you is this. Who created the universe? Did the Father create the universe? Did the Son create the universe? Or did the Holy Spirit create the universe? Who is responsible for the creation of the universe? Now, in your model, you cannot actually say that the Father created the universe in a full sense. If you do say that, then you can't say that the Son created the universe in a full sense. And if you say that, you can't say the Holy Spirit, because you can't have two subjects operating on one object and creating it and being responsible in a full sense. I can't go to the gym and pump 100 kilograms by myself, as well as my friend over here, or William Lane Craig, doing the same thing. Yeah, it could be shared, but then if it's shared, then you've got 1/3 God. So can you clarify? Do you believe that the Father is 1/3 responsible for the creation of the universe? Or do you believe in the logical contradiction that you have two subjects that are fully responsible for the creation of the universe? Which one do you believe?
I gave you an extra 20 seconds for the interruption, but Dr. Craig, it's now your turn, 2 minutes.
Causal overdetermination is not incoherent, Mr. Hijab. Imagine a candle being lit by two simultaneous matches, each of which is sufficient to illuminate the candle. In the case of the Trinity, the classical Christian doctrine is in Latin, opera ad extra sunt indivisa, that the operations of the Trinity toward the external world are undivided and therefore undertaken by all three persons at once. Now, I don't agree with that doctrine in every case. I think that leads to real problems, but I think that is very plausible with respect to the doctrine of creation, that the three persons act in concert with each other to create the world. So they're all responsible for the creation, and in the New Testament, creation is ascribed both to the Father and to the Son.
If they're responsible, they can only be responsible either in a partial sense or in a full sense. They can't be responsible both in a partial sense and a full sense. You said causal overdetermination. I'm sorry to say you have not answered the question. The question is, can you have two subjects that are fully responsible, to a degree of 100%, fully responsible for the creation of one thing in its entirety? For example, can you have two mothers that are fully responsible for the production of one child? Fully responsible. I think even the transgender movement would raise their eyebrow to this. The LGBT, they will say, no, Dr. Craig is lost. It's sorry to say. No one can say this. Can there be two authors that are fully responsible for the writing of one book? Could there, I mean, once again, when you talk about, you don't want to state this because I know it's heresy. It's heresy to say that the Father is not the creator of the universe 100%. But that's what you have to say to avoid contradiction. So why don't you say that? Why don't you say that the Father is not the creator? He is a partial creator. He is a 1/3 creator. He's a 33% creator. The Father is not fully responsible for the creation of the universe. Is that correct?
Yeah. I don't think you understand causal overdetermination, Mr. Hijab. When two matches light a flame simultaneously or light a candle, they don't each contribute 50% to the lighting of the candle. They are each 100% sufficient for the effect, but they act concurrently with each other. And so in the act of creation, I see absolutely no problem with saying that there is a concurrence here of the action of the three persons of the Trinity to produce this creative effect.
Okay, so to respond to this very clearly, your candle example with overdetermination, causal overdetermination, it's disanalogous to what we are talking about. Why? If you have two candles that come together to light a flame, you will have a bigger flame, you see. There's sufficient condition. There's sufficient. You've written this in your book on logic. You have a fantastic book, and I recommend it to the people for children on logic. The difference between necessary and sufficient conditions. What is required for the lighting of a candle, what is a necessary condition for the lighting of a candle, is not achieved with the lighting of two candles. What is required for the creation of the universe is not achieved with the creation with two creators creating the same universe. So I'm saying it's disanalogous because we're talking about the flame, and the flame here is a product of the two lights that you've talked about, which is a bigger flame. I'm saying now each atom, each quark, each whatever it is in the universe, proton, electron, how is it conceivable, possible, intelligible that there can be two subjects that are fully responsible for each of those things to a degree of 100%? How is it possible that I can go to the gym and pump 100 kilos and somebody else can pump the same 100 kilos? How is it possible that a mother can give birth to a child to a degree of 100%, that another the production of the same child?
Mohamed,
these analogies are the ones that are analogous.
Not to cut you off, but we couldn't hear you the last 10 seconds or so. Can you just repeat your last point?
I said the analogies which are analogous are, for example, how is it possible, I asked, for there to be a mother who gives birth to a child and that she is responsible for that production 100%, and then to be another mother for 100% responsibility? Why don't you admit that on your model, you have to say the Father is not completely responsible for the creation of the universe. He has to only be partially responsible. Why can't you admit that?
I don't admit it because your analogies are inept, like two women giving birth to the same child. In a case like that, you're absolutely right. You cannot have overlapping causes or causal overdetermination. But that doesn't imply that there are not other cases, such as the illustration I used to show that there can be cases of causal overdetermination where three agents work together to bring about a single effect. Now, every physical illustration is going to involve points of disanalogy when you're talking about spiritual entities. So the fact that maybe the flame would be bigger if it's lit by two matches instead of one match, that's just irrelevant to the question of whether or not you can have two causes currently acting to produce a single effect. So I'm just not persuaded at all by your objection.
It's not, it's with the greatest of respect, but it's not for me to be, I mean, it's not for you to be persuaded with what I'm saying. It's really for us to be persuaded with what you're saying, because frankly, even Christian co-religionists of yours are not accepting what you're saying. Scott Williams, who wrote a peer-reviewed paper, and he was asking the fundamental question about necessary agreement, and he gave an example which maybe we can move to, because I don't agree with anything you just said there. I mean, you talked about the flame, the two matches coming to create a bigger flame. But that is clearly a different product. The two matches are different to the flame. Yes. There is not a single analogy that you can bring which match the analogies that I've brought forward, which show the fundamental point, which, by the way, many of the Islamic thinkers and like Ibn Rushd and Al-Razi and others spoke about this, which is that you cannot have two subjects that are responsible fully for the same thing to a degree of 100%, but the public will judge. The public will judge who is right and who is wrong on this, and maybe even your Christian brethren will judge. But at this point, you have not convinced anybody. The second point that you mentioned, yes.
He's got another minute.
Oh, sorry.
Would you like to continue?
So my question is this now. Unnecessary agreement, yes? If the father wanted to do something, let's say, for example, he wanted to take life away from William Lane Craig, and the son wanted to keep life in William Lane Craig, is it possible that can both happen at the same time? No, it cannot happen. Is it possible that both of them won't happen? No, because that will contradict the law of excluded middle. The first one contradicts the law of non-contradiction. The second one contradicts the law of excluded middle. Is it possible that William Lane Craig can have life in his body without any reason? No, because that contradicts the PSR, the principle of sufficient reason. Now, the question is this. Is the father capable of supervening on the will of the son? Is the son capable of supervening on the will of the father? Is the father capable of creating the universe all by himself?
All right, that's time.
Without any involvement from the son?
Oh. Well, those are two different questions. Certainly the father would be capable of creating the universe by himself if he wanted to, and the son wanted to. What I'm arguing simply is that there is no disagreement among the three persons of the Trinity, nor is there any reason to think that this is impossible or incoherent. And in fact, the position that I'm articulating here is the standard Christian position. Opera ad extra sunt indivisa. The operations of the Trinity toward the external world are undivided. It's only the opera ad intra, the intra-Trinitarian relations that are traditionally differentiated from each other. So the position I'm taking, whether it's right or wrong, is the mainstream Christian view. It's not a peculiarity of William Lane Craig's theology.
No. The position that you've... Sorry. The position that you take on partialism is absolutely not the mainstream view. It's seen as a heresy almost across the board. It's seen as a heresy across the board with Protestants and Catholics and Eastern Orthodox to say that the persons are parts of God in the way that you've said. But put that to the side, no problem. My point is this. Let's go back to the thing that you've said. You said it's possible for the Father is capable of creating the universe by himself. Okay, let's take that for a second. If the Father is capable of creating the universe by himself, but he does not create it by himself, but according to you, creates it in concert with the Son and the Holy Spirit. These are your words, not mine. In concert, these are the words you use. Yes? That the Father is capable, but no, he does it in concert with the will of the Holy Spirit, the Son and the Holy Spirit. That means to say that the addition of the Son and the Holy Spirit have had an inhibiting impact on the will of the Father. That means to say that the Father is being inhibited by the Son. And by the way, just to be clear, this is not my arguments. This is exactly the argument of the Quran. مَا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ مِنْ وَلَدٍ وَمَا كَانَ مَعَهُ مِنْ إِلَهٍ إِذًا لَذَهَبَ كُلُّ إِلَهٍ بِمَا خَلَقَ وَلَعَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. In chapter 23, verse number 91, that Allah has not taken a son, nor does he have any creator with him. If that was the case, they would have taken each part of what they have created and they would have tried to outstrip one another in power. The reason why you are not able to answer this question is because it comes from the highest source. We believe it comes from God. This argument is a godly argument. And this is why necessary agreement on your model there is no real way to prove it. You ask, what is incoherent about your model? What is incoherent about your model is that when you look at it and you look at each person of the Trinity and you look at the Father, what he's capable of doing by himself versus what he's capable of doing the Son and the Holy Spirit, you realize that he's capable of doing less because of the Son and the Holy Spirit. And if he's capable of doing less because of the Son and the Holy Spirit, that means to say that the Son and the Holy Spirit are having an inhibiting impact, which is not powerful then. The Father has been stripped from his omnipotence because of the Son and the Holy Spirit. There's no possible way that you can have a part of God which is both omnipotent in the full sense and in the partial sense at the same time, because a part is by definition smaller than the whole. Wouldn't you agree with that?
That the part is not the whole, certainly.
Yes. Yeah.
But I simply don't understand the objection that you're pressing here. I don't see how the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit willing together to produce the same effect is any imposition upon the Father's will or derides in any way from his omnipotence. I think that your argument is just a non sequitur. And as far as partialism is concerned, I think our audience needs to have this defined. I suggested that we could think of the persons as parts of the Trinity in the sense that the whole Godhead is not just one person. Now, you yourself hold to a sort of doctrine of Tawheed that involves partialism, if I'm not mistaken, because you believe that God has a diversity of attributes like omnipotence, omnipresence, goodness, eternity, and that God is not identical to his properties. Neither are the properties identical to one another, but that they are distinct. And so this is the same sort of position that I've suggested that a Trinitarian could take if he wants to.
William Lane Craig, whether I believe in the moon is made of cheese or whether I believe that I can fly, it doesn't change the Trinity. It won't make it into coherent, because right now we're talking about whether the Trinity is coherent. You're talking about what I believe. You're talking about fallacies and non sequiturs. This is a tu quoque fallacy. If anything, let's look at what you said, because you talk about the part of God. Because you do like to do this. You like to make analogies with animals, godly analogies with animals. You said a cat's DNA or skeleton is feline. Even if neither a cat nor is this, even if neither is a cat, nor is this sort of a downgraded or attenuated felinity. A cat skeleton is fully and ambiguously feline. So what you're doing is essentially saying that the persons of the Trinity are to God like a skeleton of a cat is like to a cat. And that is different from what any Muslim has ever said in the history of Islam. No, you will not find a quote like this from a single Muslim scholar, even the most extreme of them, or the most heretical from a mainstream demographic perspective. But the point I'm making to you is this: if it is the case that God or the Father is a part of God, if the Son is a part of God, and if the Holy Spirit is a part of God, how can a part of an entity take responsibility for the actions of the whole entity? The creation of the universe is one act. How can a part of an entity take full responsibility for the creation of an entire act? Can you please answer that question?
Well, real quick, we are coming at the end of our time together today, so we will need to transition at this point to closing statements.
Okay, no problem. I think the point has been made.
Thank you.
So before we do that, I just want to let the audience know really quickly that after this debate tonight at 7 p.m., we are going to be doing a debate review on this channel. Make sure to check that out. We've got some special guests joining us. I've got it linked in the description of this video as well. With that, Dr. Craig, whenever you're ready.
Sure. I want to close by addressing personally our Muslim listeners today. I imagine that most of you have probably been raised in Muslim homes and perhaps even in Muslim culture. And I think you would agree that being raised in a certain way doesn't provide a good reason for thinking that that religion is true. If a Christian were to say that I believe Christianity is true because that's how I was raised, you would think that was a pretty weak argument. In exactly the same way, I think many Muslims today are beginning to ask themselves, how do I really know that Islam is true? And as a result, many Muslims are succumbing to the temptations of the new atheism and to agnosticism. Now, I think that's wholly unnecessary and unwarranted. I think there are good arguments for the existence of God. And so I believe that we should be theists. But the question of where you go beyond that to what sort of theism, Islamic or Christian theism, I think is going to depend upon the person of Jesus of Nazareth. Who was Jesus of Nazareth? He was more, I believe, than just a mere prophet of God. He claimed to be the long-awaited Messiah, the Son of God in a unique sense, and the divine human Son of Man. And he was crucified for these allegedly blasphemous claims. But I believe that there is good historical evidence that God raised Jesus from the dead. And by doing that, he vindicated in a public and unequivocal sense the truth of those allegedly blasphemous claims for which he was crucified. And for that reason, I am a convinced and ardent Christian theist. And so I would simply want to invite you to begin to look at the person of Jesus and the evidence for him and his resurrection. We have thousands of resources available free of charge on our website, reasonablefaith.org. And I would invite you to view or to read those resources and to ask yourself, could this really be true? Could the Christian God actually be the true God? And I think if you'll do that, it could change your life in the same way that it changed mine.
All right, and Mohamed, when you're ready, I did want to just mention really quickly that I'm so sorry we haven't been able to read any super chats. We just haven't had time today. We wanted to devote most of it to the dialogue between Dr. Craig and Mohamed. So, Mohamed, whenever you're ready.
The public will realize that Dr. William Lane Craig, despite completing 2 PhDs and, in my opinion, being the foremost and the most prolific and most influential, most significant Christian debater of the last century, has retreated from the entire discussion altogether. Instead of talking about the Trinity and summarizing his arguments, which he knows are feeble and that the Christian population doesn't even agree with themselves, he started talking about the resurrection and crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and he's gone into full preacher mode instead of going into philosophical mode and rational mode, which he made his career on. That's the thing. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, the public will see, and the public will make their decision today based on what we have said. Because what we have done is we've dismantled Thomas Aquinas together, me and Dr. William Lane Craig. Yes, Dr. William Lane Craig is right that if you take an identity view of God, such that the Father is with the identity is God, and the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God in that sense, then that means that the Father is the Son, because that contravenes the law of identity to say that it's not the case. And if you take the social Trinitarian view of Gregory of Nyssa and these other people, which many of the Eastern Orthodox believe, that's already 60 or 70% of Christianity. Then, according to him, it's polytheism. So me and Dr. Craig done the work together to dismantle the majority of the Christian faith. And then now, we talked about his view, which is the partialist view, really and truly, and we've seen how it doesn't achieve necessary agreement. We've seen through the Quranic arguments how that the wills cannot, they don't always have to. There's not an impossibility for them to conflict. And what I will say is this: he talks about reasonable faith. I've been following reasonable faith, and that they've done really good work with the atheists. But the Sapiens Institute, which also has which I work for and co-found, has a website, which is sapiensinstitute.org, has a lot of what he's talking about Christianity for Islam. So if you're a Christian listening to this and you realize now that the Trinity is false, it's defunct, it's a rationally incoherent doctrine, and you want the pure monotheism, the one God to worship without this complication, this Father, Son, or Holy Spirit, incarnation, this, that, the other, then it's Islam that you have to start looking into with sincerity. If you are sincere, the whole problem is solved. The whole problem is solved. sapiensinstitute.org. And if you want evidences for the rationality and the truth of Islam, then MohamedHijab.com has an article of 10 of the evidences of why Islam is true. So the point I'm making to you is that the argument has been failed miserably by Dr. Craig. He has not been able to achieve even to the pleasure or the satisfaction of his co-religionists a standard of evidence that is acceptable for a rational mind.
All right, thank you. Do you mind if I ask you guys one last question, Dr. Craig? I know you've got a short time limit here, but can I ask one question that might help to bring us back together? So I sent you guys these questions in advance, but I want to know, what is one thing that you like about the other person's views?
Yeah,
kind of encourage some more.
I like his monotheism. We both agree that there is exactly one God. Moreover, I like his denial of divine simplicity. I don't agree with those who say that God is not complex in his being. Mr. Hijab's doctrine of Tawheed, which we really didn't hear very much about tonight, is not a doctrine of divine simplicity, which says that God's properties are all identical, that God is identical to his properties, or that his essence is existence. And so on that, we very much concur, and I appreciate that positive feature of his view.
Mohammed, what about you?
I like Dr. William Lane Craig as a person. I think he's done a fantastic job, and I've read almost every single book that he's written, maybe to his surprise. But what I will say is this. I mean, what I do like about his views is his bravery in denying the eternal begotten nature of the second person. Yes, on the one hand, he's rejected all of Christianity, Orthodox Christianity with a small case O. He's rejected it. But it takes bravery to do so, I have to say, intellectual and academic bravery to do so. And I particularly like it because I agree with it. How can you believe that there is a co-equal, co-eternal son who has now been generated and caused by the Father? This is a contradiction, and it's rationally implausible in my opinion. And it's something we are taught as children, as 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. Qul huwa Allahu ahad, say is Allah one and only. Allahu samad, the self-sufficient. He begets not, lam yalid wa lam yulad. He begets not, nor is he begotten. Wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. And there's nothing like him. And this is the simple doctrine of what it means, the Islamic standard of believing in one God, that if someone believes in, they will be saved. They will be saved.
Well, I appreciate you guys watching Capturing Christianity, this debate. Feel free to continue watching our other content and subscribe. And if you'd like to support us, patreon.com. Again, links to that are in the description. Thank you guys for watching today. We'll see you in the next video. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet.